thank goodness. Oh my God! For the love of God!
Despite being predetermined, professional wrestling is one of the most dangerous avenues an athlete can go down. The risks involved are much real, and the pain and torment that wrestlers put their body through simply can't be argued against. There is no margin for error in wrestling, as one poorly executed move could seriously hurt an opponent, or even worse, take their life. A lot of wrestlers unfortunately face problems outside of the ring. This is mainly due to them turning to drugs and alcohol to combat the sheer pain that their bodies are in thanks to working 300 plus days a year. Sometimes a wrestler can go to the extreme and actually take the life of another individual as a consequence of this dependence on drugs and alcohol.
It sounded like he was in the middle of an argument. He was clearly agitated.
With that being said, here are 10 wrestlers who have actually killed. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos.
The only sport where its characters live in two worlds, where fantasy bleeds out into reality.
Number 1. The Great Khali. During the Great Khali's WWE tenure, he attained a reputation of being one of the worst on the roster. His matches would always be met with negative reviews, and the vast majority of them would feature blunders of even basic moves. WWE even gave Khali a world title run in 2007, which contained some of the worst title matches of the Ruthless Aggression era, even when facing top talents such as Rey Mysterio and Batista.
We got a race down! Who's gonna drop?
Despite this, Khali had acquired a terrible reputation prior to WWE signing him, and the reason for that reputation is shocking. During his days as an independent wrestler, Khali was facing a man called Brian Ong for the promotion called All Pro Wrestling. Ong had attained a serious concussion prior to the match in training. However, the staff at All Pro Wrestling convinced him that he should go on to compete in the match with Khali. Khali would hit Ong with a flapjack, a basic move that is perfectly safe when executed properly and isn't performed on somebody with a concussion. Unfortunately, the flapjack resulted in Ong receiving a second concussion, which resulted in him passing away. Ong's family would sue the All Pro Wrestling promotion and be awarded $1.3 million. Khali's reputation would be tarnished, but this didn't appear to affect the intention of WWE to sign the 7-foot superstar and push him to the moon. Number 2. Jimmy Snuka. WWE Hall of Famer Jimmy Snuka is one of the most legendary wrestling figures of all time. He has dived from the top of the cage at Madison Square Garden, continues to be played in highlight reels, and will likely continue to be showcased forever. Despite a legendary career, a dark mark will always exist on the legacy of Snuka, and this is due to the passing of his girlfriend, Nancy Argentino. Following a match in 1983, Snuka called an ambulance to attend to Nancy, but she unfortunately passed away due to injury on her brain. Snuka was the only suspect in the case to find out who was responsible for the bizarre death of Nancy, but there wasn't enough evidence to convict the wrestler of the crime. Despite this, in 2015, 32 years after the tragic passing of Nancy, Snuka would be arrested and charged for third-degree murder. However, it was ultimately ruled that Snuka was not mentally competent to stand trial and he would pass away in 2017. The case of Nancy Argentino would remain officially unresolved. Number 3. Scott Hall. Scott Hall is one of the most famous wrestlers of all time, attaining success in WWE under the Razor Ramon and then later as part of the most famous factions of all time in WCW with the NWO alongside Nash and Hogan. Many fans are unaware that the legendary wrestler Scott Hall was involved in the killing of another human being. Hall would get into a confrontation with a man outside a nightclub. The man then pulled out a gun on Hall before Hall managed to attain the gun off the individual before shooting the man dead. Hall was never punished for the incident because he quite rightly claimed self-defense, meaning the case was dropped. In a later interview with ESPN in 2011, Hall reflected on the incident, stating how it will haunt him forever. Number 4. Ox Baker. Ox Baker isn't a household name in the world of professional wrestling. If fans know who he is, it's likely due to negative reasons. Ox Baker was involved in the death of 2 wrestlers in the early 1970s.
Twice in the last 20 years I've hit people and they died in the ring.
Baker used a finisher known as the Heart Punch, which was later inappropriately named the Hurt Punch. The move is a basic strike to the chest area, and if done properly, shouldn't remotely hurt the wrestler taking the move. Unfortunately, nobody told Baker this. In 1971, he accidentally hit Alberto Torres with the move, and as a result, Torres passed away from a ruptured appendix, and then later, a wrestler known as Ray Gunkel would have a heart attack in the ring following taking the move and would die shortly after. Baker would never be charged with any crimes, as they were classed as accidents.
You know, their wives asked me if I apologized to them about their husbands. Their husbands were not in shape!
He would continue to work until 2014 before passing away at the age of 80 that very same year. Number 5. Brian McGee. The name Brian McGee may not ring a bell to many wrestling fans. He was a relatively unknown wrestler, but he was at one stage in the WWE's developmental territory, FCW, but he would never receive a main roster call-up. McGee, however, would be in the headlines in 2013 when he brutally stabbed his ex-girlfriend to death. Even crazier is that he uploaded a picture to his personal Facebook page of his ex-girlfriend's bloody arm. McGee is now serving a life sentence for this awful act. Number 6. Saito. Pro wrestling is so dangerous that one move can be deadly. This was evident in a match in Japan in 2009, as Saito would team with a wrestler called Bison Smith against the team of Misawa and Shiozaki. The match was booked to go over 30 minutes, but unfortunately the match would end suddenly when Saito would perform a back suplex on Misawa. Misawa was motionless and the match was instantly stopped. A doctor in attendance attempted to perform CPR, but it was too late and Misawa had already passed away. It was reported that Misawa had been wrestling hurt for an extended period of time, and Misawa landed wrong upon impact of the back suplex, which in turn severed his spinal column. Misawa was just days away from celebrating his 47th birthday, and despite his premature passing, Misawa attained an exceptional legacy in Japanese wrestling that will stick with wrestling fans forever. Number 7. Jose Gonzalez. The murder of legendary wrestler Bruiser Brody is one of the most famous yet tragic stories in the history of professional wrestling. The story goes that in July 1988, popular Puerto Rican wrestler Jose Gonzalez got into an argument backstage with Bruiser Brody, and this led to a physical confrontation which had tragic consequences. 2 screams were heard in the shower area of the locker room, and this led to wrestling legend Tony Atlas rushing to see what the source of the screams were. Here he would see Brody holding his stomach while Gonzalez would be seen holding a knife. Due to the sheer amount of people outside the arena, it took paramedics over an hour to attend to Brody, but his stab wound was far too fatal and he would unfortunately pass away that very day. Gonzalez would claim self-defense and testified his own defense, and he would be acquitted of murder Brody in 1989. Number 8. Vern Gagne. Vern Gagne had attained a reputation as one of the most respected wrestlers of all time, mainly due to his work in the territory days of professional wrestling, and he was also known as being the owner of the American Wrestling Association. He also went on to be inducted into the WWE, WCW, and Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, which speaks volumes in just how respected he was. Despite this, in 2009, Gagne would be involved in an incident which would impact his legacy forever. Gagne got into a confrontation with a 97-year-old man. He then threw him to the ground, and the man would unfortunately later die from the injuries from the fall to the ground. Gagne was suffering from dementia, meaning he wasn't able to form the necessary mental capacity required to be blamed for the incident. His crime would therefore go unpunished. Number 9. New Jack. New Jack has acquired a reputation for being one of the most dangerous and frankly craziest wrestlers in the history of pro wrestling. There have been several occasions where New Jack has attempted to end the life of a fellow wrestler. For instance, the mass transit incident where he almost made a fellow wrestler bleed to death by blading him too deeply. And who could forget the time he tasered Vic Grimes and threw him off the scaffolding, which nearly ended him on the spot. Jack himself admits to being responsible for up to 4 homicides during his time as a bounty hunter prior to getting into the crazy world of professional wrestling.
I ain't here to save the world. My only concern is putting your ass in jail and getting paid for it.
Despite Jack claiming responsibility for multiple deaths, it's important to state that these homicides haven't been verified by anyone other than Jack.
I would not hesitate to shoot your ass, stab your ass, cut your ass, run over you with a car.
And number 10, Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit is one of, if not the greatest technical wrestler of all time. He was also one of the most popular wrestlers of all time and attained a mass following and an extremely loyal fan base. Benoit was on his way to a Hall of Fame worthy career, including a major world title win in the main event of WrestleMania 20 when he defeated both Triple H and Shawn Michaels. However, all the accomplishments and all the admiration would be forever tarnished in the summer of 2007. Benoit was scheduled to face CM Punk for the ECW title at the Vengeance pay-per-view, but he was unable to make the event due to him claiming his wife Nancy and his son Daniel were suffering from food poisoning. But the reality was that Benoit had ended them both before taking his own life. The grim realities of the situation wouldn't be revealed until a day or two after the pay-per-view event. WWE would host a Chris Benoit tribute show on the Monday following the Vengeance pay-per-view, weirdly replacing a show that was supposed to be a tribute show for the Mr. McMahon character who'd been killed off in the storyline just a week prior. Once news came out in relation to Benoit's actions, McMahon would declare that the Benoit name would never be mentioned on WWE television ever again, and to this day, that statement was proven to be correct. It would be revealed later that Benoit had the brain capacity of an old man with dementia because of the wear and tear he had undertaken throughout his numerous years of professional wrestling. This, alongside a documented history of abusing prescription drugs, the doctor who prescribed these drugs would admit he overprescribed them to several athletes, sometimes without even examining the needs of the athlete in question. The doctor himself, who went under the name Dr. Austin, would receive 10 years in prison. But there you have it guys, 10 wrestlers who have killed somebody. Be sure to leave your comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.